We are starting today with, honestly, a geopolitical whiplash that is, frankly, hard to process. Like, we have an international peace treaty that just got thrown out the window
Yeah.
because a sitting U.S. vice president claims the draft looked like it was generated by an AI.
Yeah, literally AI.
Right. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is actively sitting on a $720 million pile of burning drone wreckage, and Sean Combs has just rolled into federal court with a legal defense involving the First Amendment and, well, amateur porn.
It is wild.
You absolutely have to stick around until the end to hear how all these crazy details connect. We are Mike and Abby, and welcome to Daily World Podcasts. Forget everything you know about boring news. We are taking the wildest, most impactful stories that hit the planet today and breaking them down so you don't have to.
Exactly.
Whether you are on a long drive, crushing a workout, or just feeling a little bored, we are here to keep you updated with the world and make your next hour incredibly interesting. Because, it is absolute unfiltered chaos out there today. The sheer volume of global instability we're looking at is just staggering.
It really is. So I want to get right into the physical reality on the ground, because right now we technically have a ceasefire on paper between the United States and Iran.
Right, on paper.
Yeah, this 2-week provisional truce is supposedly active, but the actual landscape is pure carnage, and the diplomatic posturing is it's bizarre. This Saturday, April 11th, there is an inaugural diplomatic summit kicking off in Islamabad, Pakistan.
Okay.
And the U.S. delegation is flying incredibly heavy. You have Vice President JD Vance leading the charge, alongside Jared Kushner and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff.
That's a heady lineup.
It is. And sitting across the table, the Iranian team is led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and, senior representatives from their Supreme National Security Council. They are supposed to be negotiating this vital 10-point framework.
Right.
But here is the absolute kicker. VP Vance literally tossed out version 1 of this proposal.
Wait, he just threw it out?
Tossed it out. He told the press they discarded it because it was so poorly constructed, so generic and maximalist, that it looked like it was written by ChatGPT.
You have to be kidding me.
Nope. They are now scrambling and working off version 2. I need you to explain this to me because it sounds insane. Are we seriously rejecting international nuclear peace frameworks because they, read like bad prompt engineering? How does a treaty even get drafted like that?
It is a terrifying reflection of where modern diplomacy is at right now. Like, when you draft an international ceasefire, especially one involving nuclear enrichment and complex military de-escalation, the language has to be mathematically precise.
Right.
A real 10-point framework involves excruciatingly detailed mechanisms. It dictates exact geographical coordinates for troop pullbacks. It specifies the exact number of centrifuge cascades Iran is allowed to keep spinning at facilities like Natanz.
A hard number.
Yeah, exactly. And it outlines the precise protocols for International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors to verify compliance. But the sources are indicating that the first draft, whether it was submitted by the Iranians to anchor their demands or just hastily thrown together by the mediating Pakistani foreign ministry and Chinese consultants, it just lacked all of that operational mechanics.
So it was just, what, diplomatic fluff?
Basically, yeah. It was a wish list formatted to look like a treaty. It used generic phrasing about, mutual respect for sovereignty and immediate cessation of hostilities without offering a single mechanical enforcement protocol.
Wow.
So when Vance mocked it as being written by AI, he was fundamentally calling out the clerical laziness of the proposal. He was rejecting the idea of using automated boilerplate diplomacy for a hardline existential negotiation.
Makes sense.
Right. You cannot have a generative language model hallucinate your nuclear verification standards. The stakes are just too high. They are arguing over whether Iran retains the right to enrich uranium to 60% purity, which is, a hair's breadth away from weapons grade.
Or total dismantlement, right.
Exactly. Or if there is a total verifiable dismantlement of their nuclear infrastructure, you just cannot draft that with generic talking points.
But, while these delegations are arguing over drafting software and generic phrasing in a luxury hotel in Pakistan, the physical reality happening in Lebanon is an absolute nightmare.
It really is.
Israel has officially carved out Lebanon as an independent theater of war. They are publicly claiming that their military strikes in Lebanese territory are entirely exempt from the provisional U.S.-Iran truce.
So the ceasefire simply does not apply there.
Not at all. On Wednesday, the Israeli military executed something they officially designated Operation Beepers.
Operation Beepers. That sounds incredibly clinical, almost like a sterile IT procedure. What does that actually mean on the ground?
Well, it means they hit 100 separate targets in exactly 10 minutes.
Stop. I am struggling with the sheer logistics of that. How do you actually mechanically synchronize 100 airstrikes in a 10-minute window?
It's math.
I mean, you are talking about incredibly dense airspace. How do you pull that off without your own jets crashing into each other or completely overwhelming your command and control?
It requires a masterclass in airspace deconfliction and electronic warfare. You are not just launching 100 fighter jets at once. This involves a highly synchronized web of assets.
Okay, like what?
They use loitering munitions, suicide drones that can circle high above a target for hours, combined with long-range precision artillery, and advanced fifth-generation fighters like the F-35 dropping guided munitions.
Oh, wow.
And they have AWACS planes, those massive aircraft with the radar domes on top acting as air traffic control, managing the altitude and vector of every single missile and drone in real time.
That is complex.
Yeah. They targeted Hezbollah command centers across central Beirut, the Bekaa Valley, Sidon, and southern border villages. They were specifically hunting the Radwan force missile units.
So that's where the name comes from.
Exactly. The operation was so rapid-fire, so flawlessly sequenced, that's where the beepers code name came from. It wasn't targeting hardware beepers, it was named after the sheer unrelenting speed of the strike notifications just lighting up the command boards.
I mean, the mechanical precision is terrifying, but the human cost of unleashing that much ordnance in 10 minutes has to be catastrophic.
It is staggering. The Lebanese Health Ministry confirmed over 200 dead and over 1,000 wounded on Wednesday alone.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it is the highest single-day casualty count in the 5 weeks since this renewed conflict escalated. They successfully assassinated Ali Yusuf Harshi, who is the personal secretary and nephew of Hezbollah chief Naim Qassem. But the collateral damage is immense.
1,000 wounded in 10 minutes. I want people to really process that number. There is no medical infrastructure on the face of the planet built to absorb that kind of sudden, concentrated trauma surge.
None.
Even the most advanced hospital systems in New York or London would instantly collapse under that pressure.
And Beirut's hospitals were already running on fumes. The Lebanese Red Cross had to deploy its entire national fleet of 100 ambulances simultaneously, just racing back and forth into the blast zones.
The entire fleet.
The entire fleet. Hospitals like Rafik Hariri University Hospital in Beirut are completely overwhelmed. They are literally turning critical trauma cases away at the doors because their intensive care units are beyond maximum capacity.
Yeah, it's brutal.
They are treating shrapnel wounds on the floors of the hallways. And, we have to look at the civilian toll here completely impartially. The United Nations is fiercely condemning the military action. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk put out a statement calling the scale of the destruction horrific and completely disproportionate.
Right.
The UN estimates that over 600,000 people have been displaced in Lebanon. That is nearly 10% of their entire national population forced to abandon their homes in just 5 weeks.
But the Israelis are maintaining a completely different perspective on the necessity of this operation.
Right. Yes. To present the other side impartially, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz issued a definitive statement, making it clear that these strikes are going to continue in the Litani River area, period.
Non-negotiable.
Right. The Israeli government stated, non-negotiable objective is ensuring the permanent safety of the residents in northern Israel. They view the total dismantlement of Hezbollah's military and tunnel infrastructure in southern Lebanon as an absolute prerequisite for their own citizens to return home safely.
I see.
They are arguing that Hezbollah embedded those command centers inside civilian infrastructure, making the collateral damage tragic but strategically unavoidable.
So, we have an inaugural peace summit happening on Saturday.
Yeah.
But every single actor in the region is using the hours leading up to it to inflict as much absolute devastation as possible.
Yeah.
They're trying to maximize their leverage at the negotiating table. It is basically a scorched earth policy disguised as diplomacy.
Exactly. It is a race to see who can inflict the most pain before the ink dries. And before the Thursday lull kicked in, Iran lashed out in a way we have not seen in modern warfare.
What did they do?
They executed a perfectly synchronized 24-hour retaliation cycle, hitting 5 different Gulf nations simultaneously.
5?
5. They struck Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar. In Saudi Arabia, they targeted the east-west crude oil pipeline right around 1 in the afternoon local time.
right in the middle of the day.
Yeah, it caused a partial shutdown of the pipeline and significant structural damage. And then a few hours later, satellite imagery confirmed a massive 125 megawatt fire at Saudi Aramco's Abqaiq oil processing facility.
Wait, I have to jump in here and push back on the mechanics of this.
Right.
Because hitting 5 sovereign nations at exactly the same time is not just pushing a button on a desk.
No, it's not.
We are talking about penetrating some of the most heavily funded, technologically advanced airspace on the globe. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have Patriot missile batteries, T-8 systems, early warning radars. How does Iran manage to bypass all of that and hit 5 different sovereign defense systems in a single operational window?
It is a massive coordination of asymmetrical warfare, heavily reliant on overwhelming the processing power of the defense radars.
Oh, like swarming.
Exactly. They don't just fire one big missile, they use a highly complex mix of low-flying cruise missiles and massive swarms of cheap, expendable drones. The radar systems on a Patriot battery can only track and engage so many targets at once.
Right.
So if you send 50 cheap drones at a facility, the defense system wastes its multi-million-dollar interceptors on the decoys, and then the actual payload, the ballistic missile, slips through the gap in the coverage.
That's terrifying.
The UAE military successfully engaged 17 ballistic missiles and 35 drones, which is an incredible interception rate, but the falling debris still caused a massive fire at the Habshan gas complex, injuring 3 workers.
Wow.
Bahrain intercepted 6 missiles and 31 drones. But the absolute most alarming part of this entire strike package was what unfolded in Kuwait. Kuwaiti air defenses had to scramble to intercept 28 drones specifically aimed at their desalination plants and power stations.
Targeting a desalination plant. Let's break this down, because for the listener who might live in a place with abundant rainfall, they might not understand the geography.
Right.
What does hitting a desalination plant actually mean for a country in the middle of the desert? What is the physical mechanism of that threat?
It means targeting their literal biological ability to survive. Kuwait does not have freshwater lakes. They do not have rivers or deep underground aquifers they can easily draw from.
So it's all from the ocean.
Almost entirely. They rely on taking raw, highly saline seawater from the Persian Gulf and pushing it through massive industrial reverse osmosis membranes to remove the salt and create drinking water. It is an incredibly energy-intensive process. If you destroy the power stations running those pumps, or you destroy the filtration membranes themselves, you aren't just hurting their economic output. You are plunging millions of people into an immediate, life-threatening dehydration crisis.
Jeez.
Without those plants, a modern city in the desert runs out of potable water in a matter of hours, not weeks. The drones were intercepted, causing only minor scorch damage to the exterior infrastructure, but the psychological message was loud and clear.
Yeah, that they can hit anything.
Exactly. Iran is willing to bypass military targets and strike at the foundational elements of civilian survival.
It is a terrifying escalation. They are demonstrating that if their own domestic infrastructure is threatened by U.S. or Israeli strikes, they will systematically dismantle the energy and water security of every single U.S. ally in the region. They're literally holding the entire Gulf's ability to sustain life hostage.
And they're holding the global shipping economy hostage, too.
Oh.
Yeah, the Strait of Hormuz, which sees a massive percentage of the world's oil transit, is technically open again as of Thursday morning. The Greek-owned bulk carrier NJ Earth and the Liberia-flagged Daytona Beach were the first massive commercial ships to transit through.
Okay, so ships are moving.
They are, but the Iranian Revolutionary Guard left all their sea mines in the water.
Wait, what?
Yeah. They literally published a maritime chart basically calling the floating explosives their greatest strategic advantage. So they established these highly specific, narrow alternative routes weaving through the minefield, and they are demanding substantial, safe passage fees for any commercial vessel that wants to use them.
Right, so they left high explosives in the water, drew a treasure map, and set up a cashier's desk.
Pretty much.
Because nothing screams legitimate maritime commerce quite like, handing your corporate credit card to a guy floating on a naval mine in the middle of the ocean. It is literally an easy pass lane with high explosives. The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of a sovereign military setting up a toll booth in a literal minefield is staggering. It is pure extortion wrapped in international maritime flags. I mean, How does an insurance company even underwrite a cargo ship driving through that?
They don't, or they charge premiums that completely wipe out the profit margin of the cargo.
Right.
And Vice President Vance has already gone on the record warning that the entire 2-week ceasefire is void if the Strait isn't fully open to unencumbered free traffic.
I bet.
But while the U.S. issues diplomatic warnings about toll booths, the actual physical financial cost of this war is piling up right in the Pentagon's lap. The Department of Defense just admitted, in a very quiet briefing, that they have lost 24 MQ-9 Reaper drones since this conflict began.
24.
Yeah. And 8 of those were lost just since April 1st.
24 Reapers.
Oh.
You have to be kidding me.
I wish I was. That is roughly 7% of the entire United States Air Force fleet of Reapers wiped out in a matter of weeks.
7%.
That is $720 million in unmanned hardware completely gone, falling out of the sky in flames. It is the most significant attrition of unmanned aerial assets in American military history.
But how is that even mechanically possible? The Reaper is designed to loiter at 50,000 feet. It is supposed to be way out of range of standard man-portable air defense systems. How are the Iranians taking down 24 of them?
Because the Iranian surface-to-air missile network, specifically their indigenous systems like the Bavar 373, are proving to be vastly more effective and capable of high-altitude engagement than pre-war Western intelligence predicted.
Oh, wow.
The Reapers are relatively slow.
Yep.
They rely on altitude for stealth, but when a radar system can paint them at 50,000 feet, they are basically sitting ducks for a Mach 3 interceptor missile. We are bleeding highly expensive hardware at an unsustainable rate.
That is wild.
Yeah. That drone price tag is nauseating, but it completely pales in comparison to the absolute domestic meltdown happening right now involving the 25th Amendment and your local tap water.
You are absolutely right, because the shockwaves of this geopolitical conflict are violently crashing back onto domestic U.S. soil. We have a massive, unprecedented constitutional crisis brewing in Washington right now.
Yeah, we do.
Over 70 Democratic lawmakers are currently demanding that the 25th Amendment be invoked against President Trump, specifically aiming to remove him from office, citing a lack of mental fitness to command the armed forces.
And this demand is entirely anchored to his social media activity regarding the ceasefire, right?
Can you explain the mechanics of how the 25th Amendment actually works here? Because, people throw that phrase around a lot without understanding the incredibly high legal bar it requires.
It is an incredibly high bar. Specifically, they are referencing Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, and this is an impeachment where Congress votes on high crimes.
Right. Section 4 requires the vice president and a majority of the principal officers of the executive departments, meaning the cabinet, to submit a written declaration to the Speaker of the House, the President pro tempore of the Senate, stating that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office.
Okay.
If they do that, the vice president immediately assumes the powers as acting president. If the president contests it, Congress has to vote, and it requires a 2/3 supermajority in both chambers to sustain the removal. It has never been used in American history to forcefully remove a sitting president against their will.
Never. And they are trying to trigger this massive constitutional mechanism over a social media post.
Yes, but it's the severity of the post. President Trump posted a direct threat online stating that a whole civilization will die tonight if Iran did not immediately comply with his 11th hour demands before the ceasefire took effect.
All right, whole civilization.
The political and diplomatic backlash was instantaneous. Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island went on the record calling the president's threat to fundamentally destroy an entire Iranian civilization comparable to genocide, and labeled it a criminal act.
Wow.
The argument from these 70 lawmakers is that a commander-in-chief casually threatening the erasure of a civilization on a public timeline demonstrates a fundamental loss of rational control over the nuclear and conventional arsenal. It got so heated that several retired four-star generals issued a joint statement warning that the president's specific words could literally be used against him in future international criminal proceedings in The Hague as evidence of intent to commit a war crime.
I mean, you have 70 sitting federal lawmakers and retired upper echelon military brass openly, publicly discussing the forceful removal of the commander-in-chief during an active, highly volatile global conflict. The level of instability that projects globally is hard to overstate. Our allies and our enemies are watching Washington tear itself apart. But to present the administration side completely fairly and impartially, how are they defending the rhetoric?
Well, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt defended the post entirely and aggressively. She stated that this is a highly calculated maximum pressure rhetoric strategy.
Maximum pressure.
Right. The administration's official position is that projecting absolute, overwhelming, disproportionate consequence is exactly the psychological leverage that forced Iran to finally agree to the 2-week ceasefire in the first place, ultimately saving American and allied lives.
So they see it as a tactic.
They view it as a harsh, unpalatable, but fundamentally necessary negotiating tactic. It's the madman theory of deterrence. And Trump certainly hasn't backed down. He posted again on Thursday, explicitly warning that U.S. forces will hit Iran harder than before if the agreement is violated in any capacity.
So Washington is completely fractured on how to handle the foreign crisis. Half the government thinks the president is a strategic genius. The other half thinks he is committing war crimes online. And meanwhile, the Department of Justice is going through a massive, highly controversial internal pivot.
A huge pivot. Harmeet Dillon has just taken over the DOJ Civil Rights Division, and it was just leaked and revealed that they are launching a formal federal investigation into Cassidy Hutchinson, the former White House aide.
Right.
The entire focus of the investigation is centered on allegations that she committed perjury and lied to Congress during her explosive testimony about the events of January 6.
The whiplash there is it is stunning. Can we look at the mechanics of this?
Yeah.
The DOJ is taking resources and shifting their investigative priority from prosecuting the people who physically breached the Capitol building on January 6 to actively investigating the primary witnesses who testified against the president about that day.
Yes.
That is a fundamental rewiring of federal law enforcement priorities.
It is a total paradigm shift in the application of federal justice. And it is happening exactly while the cyber landscape is melting down.
Yeah.
Because while the politicians fight over January 6 and Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, just issued a warning that should have every single person living in the United States entirely on edge.
Definitely.
They announced that Iranian state-sponsored hackers are actively targeting and successfully exploiting programmable logic controllers, specifically models manufactured by Rockwell Automation, right here inside the domestic U.S.
Wait, pause right there. For those of us who do not work in industrial cybersecurity, what exactly is a programmable logic controller? Because I am picturing a guy with a joystick, but I know that is not right. What does a PLC actually physically do?
A PLC is the literal digital brain that tells massive physical infrastructure what to do in the real world. It is a ruggedized computer used for industrial automation. It is the software that controls the physical valves regulating American municipal water pressure. It controls the heavy switches, managing electricity grids, the temperature sensors in chemical plants, the conveyor belts in food processing facilities.
So it's everywhere.
Everywhere. It takes digital code and translates it into kinetic movement. If a foreign hacker breaches a PLC, they don't just steal data or download your emails. They gain physical control over the environment.
That's terrifying.
They can instruct a massive water valve to close when the system needs it to be open, causing pipes to burst. They can tell a power generator turbine to spin so far past its red line that it physically vibrates apart and destroys itself.
Whoa.
This is exactly what the Stuxnet virus did to Iranian centrifuges years ago, and now the Iranians are returning the favor. The CISA advisory confirms that the domestic front of the Iran war is no longer just angry rhetoric on social media. They are actively probing the code that controls the tap water flowing into your kitchen sink.
Pause for a second.
Yeah.
If you are watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment and tell us if knowing foreign hackers are inside the water grid makes you look at your kitchen sink a little differently today. Because the idea that a geopolitical conflict happening 5,000 miles away in the Middle East could result in a municipal water pressure failure in Ohio is absolutely terrifying.
It really is.
While you're side-eyeing your tap water, we need to talk about what TSA is quietly doing with your airport security data and how Wall Street is reacting to it all. Because the lines between federal agencies are blurring in a really disturbing way.
Yeah, they are.
On Wednesday, ICE officers shot and injured a man named Carlos Ivan Mendoza in Northern California during a highly targeted vehicle stop. Mendoza has a documented history of gang involvement and was wanted for questioning regarding a homicide in El Salvador.
Okay.
The Department of Homeland Security says he violently weaponized his vehicle during the stop, forcing the agents to fire defensive shots to protect themselves.
Okay, an ICE shooting on a California highway is intense, but isolated law enforcement incidents happen. Why is this specific traffic stop making national headlines and causing such a massive uproar?
because of the digital trail of how they actually tracked him down, Reuters just leaked a massive cache of internal data showing a previously unknown, highly integrated TSA-to-ICE pipeline.
A pipeline.
Over the last year, ICE has arrested more than 800 people inside the United States using tracking tips and movement data provided directly by the Transportation Security Administration.
Are you kidding me? The people scanning my laptop and confiscating my oversized bottle of shampoo at the airport are funneling passenger manifest data directly to immigration enforcement.
Apparently so.
How does that data handoff even work legally? Isn't there a massive privacy barrier between screening for airplane safety and conducting domestic immigration sweeps?
You would think so, but the legal mechanics of this data sharing agreement are incredibly murky. The reality is that the airport security line has essentially been retrofitted into a massive domestic immigration dragnet.
Wow.
When you walk up to the podium and hand the TSA agent your driver's license, they scan it. If your name and biometrics hit a specific threshold in the interconnected DHS database, that information isn't just used to see if you were on a no-fly list.
Right.
It is being immediately silently routed to ICE field offices. The agents use that real-time travel data to coordinate highly targeted arrests, sometimes days later, tracking where you landed and where you drove, like in the case of Mendoza in Northern California.
Oh.
It is a massive structural expansion of domestic surveillance capabilities that the American public was completely unaware of until this Reuters leak.
I mean, the privacy implications of that are staggering. The entire social contract of the TSA is that we submit to the indignity of the security theater to ensure the plane doesn't blow up.
Exactly.
But this means you buy a plane ticket to see your family for the holidays, you scan your boarding pass, and you are unwittingly stepping onto a digital federal enforcement tripwire. It transforms the airport from a transit hub into a law enforcement trap.
And if you think the domestic privacy landscape is volatile, you need to look at Wall Street, because the economic whiplash this week is historic.
Oh, yeah.
The minute President Trump announced the 2-week ceasefire with Iran on Wednesday, the financial markets absolutely exploded. The Dow Jones Industrial Average skyrocketed over 1,300 points in a single trading session. It closed at 47,909.
Massive.
The S&P 500 jumped 2.5%. Over 20 billion shares exchanged hands on the New York Stock Exchange. It was a massive euphoric relief rally, heavily led by tech and semiconductor stocks like Broadcom.
And oil prices completely plummeted, right?
Yeah.
Because the imminent threat of tankers burning in the Strait of Hormuz supposedly vanished overnight.
Exactly. West Texas Intermediate crude futures plunged 16% in a single day, dropping well below $95 a barrel. It was the steepest single-day decline we have seen since the absolute bottom of the market in April 2020.
That's a huge drop.
The geopolitical risk premium that traders had baked into the price of energy just evaporated instantly.
But the party on the trading floor didn't last, did it?
It did not. It was the shortest bull run in history.
Mm-hmm.
By Thursday morning, the economic hangover hit incredibly hard. The February personal consumption expenditures price report, the PCE, dropped.
Right, the inflation report.
This is the specific inflation metric the Federal Reserve actually monitors to set interest rates. And the data was brutal. It showed that core inflation is stubbornly stuck at an annualized 3%.
Ouch.
That is a full percentage point above the Fed's mandated 2% target. And to make matters vastly worse, the government revised its final fourth-quarter gross domestic product estimate down to a miserable 0.5% growth.
Wow.
And the moment everyone realized the Strait of Hormuz is still literally littered with Iranian sea mines and toll booths, oil prices immediately started aggressively climbing back toward $100 a barrel.
We really need to break down the brutal reality of this for the listener. Because when you combine those two numbers, core inflation permanently anchored at 3% and a GDP barely crawling forward at 0.5%, you are looking at the mechanical definition of stagflation.
Stagflation.
It is the absolute worst-case scenario for an economy. It means prices are rising, but economic output and corporate growth are stagnating. Even if the world doesn't end in a global nuclear war this weekend, the cost of living is vastly outpacing economic growth.
Yeah.
Real wage growth is mathematically about to turn negative for the average American worker. When your raise is 2%, but inflation is 3%, your paycheck is fundamentally buying you less food, less gas, and less housing every single month. Your standard of living is actively decaying.
We're trapped between inflation and World War III, which is exactly why the fact that humanity is currently speeding toward the moon and reinventing solar power feels incredibly well-timed. Because while Earth feels like a chaotic, expensive mess, the scientific leaps happening right now are absolutely breathtaking. NASA just confirmed that the Artemis II mission is currently in transit for a lunar flyby.
Finally, something objectively incredible. We need this.
It is historic. We have a 4-member crew currently strapped into the Orion spacecraft, which launched perfectly from the Kennedy Space Center. It is a highly complex 10-day flight specifically designed to test the deep space life support systems of the capsule under extreme radiation conditions.
Right.
This crew includes the first woman, the first person of color, and the first Canadian to ever fly to the moon. They are not landing on the surface this time, but they are utilizing a free return trajectory that is taking them further into deep space than any human being has traveled since the Apollo 17 mission in 1972. They are physically fleeing the gravity of this planet right now.
I honestly don't blame them one bit. Looking at the geopolitical and economic news we just covered, a heavily shielded lunar flyby in a tiny capsule seems like the most peaceful, rational place to be.
And back on Earth, we are seeing massive, civilization-altering technological leaps designed to make living off-grid an actual reality. Scientists just announced they hit a world record 34% power conversion efficiency using newly developed tandem perovskite silicon solar cells.
Okay, 34% efficiency. Let's look at the mechanics of this, because standard commercial silicon panels, the bulky ones we see bolted to residential houses right now, max out at what, maybe 22 or 24% efficiency?
Yeah, around there.
Why does that 10% jump actually matter in the real world? It sounds like a marginal gain.
It matters massively, and the math comes down to space limitations and light spectrums. You just mentioned the standard panels are around 24%. Bumping that up to 34% effectively increases a standard residential roof's total power output by nearly a third without increasing the physical footprint of the panels by a single inch.
Well, that's huge.
The mechanics of how they did this is brilliant. Silicon panels are great at absorbing red and infrared light, but they waste a lot of the higher energy blue light. Perovskite is a crystal structure that is incredibly efficient at capturing that blue light.
Okay, so they combine them.
So by layering the perovskite on top of the silicon, a tandem cell, they catch almost the entire spectrum. They achieved this stability breakthrough through a process called interface passivation, utilizing rare elements like rubidium and cesium to stop the chemicals from degrading in humidity.
Fascinating.
And the best part, it is designed to integrate directly into existing silicon manufacturing assembly lines, so it can hit the consumer market incredibly fast. This makes off-grid living totally, completely viable, even if you live in a cloudy northern suburb. You can run your entire house, heat your water, and fully charge an electric vehicle on a much smaller roof.
That is literally the holy grail of residential renewable energy. It completely rewrites the power dynamic of the average homeowner. You are no longer entirely reliant on a highly vulnerable, centralized municipal electrical grid, especially a grid that CISA just warned is currently being targeted and probed by Iranian state-sponsored hackers.
Exactly.
You basically become your own sovereign power station.
Exactly. The timing of the technology aligning with the grid vulnerability is wild. But while physical solar tech surges forward, the digital entertainment world is taking some massive hits. South Korean gaming giant Nexon just brutally canceled their highly anticipated Project EL after 2 full years of heavy, expensive development.
Wait, Project EL, that was the game the entire industry was calling the fantasy-style GTA, right?
Yeah.
The hype for that was massive.
Yes, it was supposed to be revolutionary. It was designed to combine the absolute chaotic open-world freedom and vehicular mechanics of Grand Theft Auto with this massive, lush fantasy aesthetic. Director Shim Ki-hoon was leading the massive development team, but Nexion's new executive chairman, Patrick Soderlund, just stepped in and completely axed it.
Just axed it.
The economics of game development right now are brutal. They are reportedly realigning all their corporate resources away from risky new IP and pouring it into AI-driven development tools and sustaining their larger, existing, proven franchises.
Wow.
A huge number of highly skilled developers are just sitting on standby right now, waiting to see if they get reassigned or laid off. The fan base that has been tracking every leak of this game since early 2024 is completely devastated.
It is a stark reminder of the economics of the digital age. It is wild how an entire digital universe, 2 years of intense human effort, coding, art design, and creativity can just be instantly deleted and wiped from existence with a single corporate boardroom decision prioritizing safe AI tools over creative
Well,
risks.
speaking of things engaging in cutthroat fights for survival, geneticists just released a fascinating, slightly terrifying study on a newly discovered phenomenon they are calling warrior wheat.
Warrior weed. Are you seriously telling me that bread has a violent, aggressive backstory?
I am, literally. Researchers utilized modern computational tools to analyze 10,000-year-old genomic data from early agricultural sites in the Fertile Crescent.
Okay.
And they discovered that early wheat plants weren't these passive, peaceful, golden crops waving gently in the wind that we picture on early farms. The very first human farms were brutal, high-stakes arenas of intense evolutionary competition.
In what way?
These ancient wheat varieties rapidly evolved upright leaves and explosive vertical growth traits. They didn't do this to produce more grain. They did it specifically to aggressively block the sun and physically kill off any competing weeds or plants around them. It is a form of mechanical biological warfare.
I am so exasperated by this planet right now. Even bread is violent. Humanity cannot even invent basic foundational agriculture without the plants immediately engaging in cutthroat biological warfare for sunlight. Is nothing peaceful.
It was an accidental byproduct of human cultivation. When early humans packed seeds tightly into rudimentary fields, the plants that could fight hardest for limited soil nutrients and sunlight survived the best.
Makes sense evolutionarily.
We eventually bred those aggressive traits out over thousands of years because modern farmers wanted the plants to focus their energy on creating larger grain sizes and uniform stalk heights for easier harvesting rather than fighting their neighbors.
Right.
But the scientists think that by studying the ancient DNA of this warrior wheat, modern geneticists might be able to use CRISPR to re-engineer crops today that can naturally suppress weeds through physical dominance, without us having to spray millions of gallons of toxic chemical herbicides onto our food supply. If you are watching on YouTube right now, hit the comments. Would you rather go to the moon on Artemis II or stay on Earth and play a fantasy GTA game off-grid using perovskite solar panels? Because honestly, given the state of the global economy and the water supply, hiding in a solar-powered cabin playing video games sounds just as appealing as deep space right now. Speaking of fighting for survival, wait until you hear the absolutely unhinged legal defense Sean Diddy Combs just rolled out in federal court.
This is going to be good.
We are moving from high science into the absolute gritty, chaotic underbelly of celebrity culture and criminal law. Sean Combs is currently frantically appealing his federal conviction, which is heavily linked to his highly organized, coercive freak-offs and his alleged massive criminal enterprise.
Right.
His newly retained legal team just appeared before a federal appeals court with a totally new, incredibly audacious angle. They are officially claiming in court documents that the freak-offs were simply the production of amateur porn, and therefore, the entire enterprise is entirely protected by the First Amendment right to free speech.
Oh, absolutely. Thomas Jefferson is just weeping with pride right now. I mean, the sheer, unadulterated cynicism of walking into a federal appellate court, looking a panel of judges in the eye, and trying to rebrand a multi-state racketeering and human trafficking enterprise as a courageous defense of free speech. Just give the guy a Nobel Prize for constitutional law right now.
Yeah.
It is incredible. How does a lawyer even write that brief with a straight face?
It is a highly unusual, borderline desperate legal pivot. His previous defense team focused heavily on traditional tactics attacking witness credibility, arguing over statutes of limitations, trying to suppress evidence.
That's the usual stuff.
But this new appellate team is going straight for constitutional mechanics. They are arguing that the government categorizing these highly produced recorded events as the foundational acts of a RICO criminal enterprise fundamentally violates his constitutional right to free expression and artistic creation.
Artistic creation, sure.
Legal scholars and experts are watching this incredibly closely because, while it sounds absurd to a layperson, if the appellate judges by even a fraction of the amateur porn classification, it might be just enough legal ambiguity to secure him bail while the incredibly long multi-year appeal process plays out. The judges are in closed deliberations right now.
It is the ultimate legal Hail Mary. But honestly, in the current fractured legal landscape we are operating in, where precedent seems to shift daily, you never really know what bizarre constitutional interpretation might actually stick to the wall.
And Diddy isn't the only massive public figure dealing with the sudden fallout of their own actions this week. Over in the digital creator space, Twitch just dropped the absolute hammer on massive streamer Zach Hoyt, who the internet knows much better as Asmongold.
Oh boy.
At exactly 8 in the evening on Monday, the Twitch moderation team banned his massive alt account, Zachrar, for 7 days.
What did he say this time to trigger a ban that severe? The terms of service on Twitch are notoriously finicky.
He was suspended over a direct, blatant hate speech violation. During a massive live stream, he went off on a highly charged political tangent and stated, and I quote, "I don't give an expletive about the opinions of illiterate third worlders."
Oof.
The Twitch automated systems and moderation team immediately flagged the audio as a direct, unmitigable violation of their terms of service regarding hateful conduct. The stream went black. Asmongold immediately went straight to X, essentially claiming there is a blatant systemic double standard on the platform. He argued that if he had made similarly derogatory comments about Americans or Western Europeans, the moderators would have completely ignored it.
The irony of the timing here is absolutely incredible. The ban is exactly 7 days, which means the platform effectively keeps one of its loudest, most influential political and cultural commentators offline right during the critical historic weekend of the massive Islamabad nuclear peace talks.
Right.
He literally silenced his own massive microphone during the biggest geopolitical event of the year because he couldn't control his rant.
His main primary account is technically still active and in good standing, but he has stubbornly refused to stream there for months due to the pressure of subscriber counts, so he is effectively muted by his own pride.
Wild.
And while the digital streaming world deals with bans and drama, traditional Hollywood is just throwing massive amounts of cash at proven action franchises to guarantee returns. We have a quick speed round of entertainment news. Netflix just officially greenlit the production of Extraction 3.
Yes, finally. Say what you want about Netflix, but they know how to shoot an action sequence.
They really do. Chris Hemsworth is fully locked in and contracted to return as the mercenary Tyler Rake. He is reuniting with Idris Elba, who is heavily expanding his role as Alcott, and Golshifteh Farahani is back as the handler, Nick Khan.
Awesome.
Sam Hargrave is returning to the director's chair to coordinate the stunts. The truly interesting mechanical twist behind the scenes is that Joe Russo is not writing the screenplay for this one. They brought in David Weil, the creator who wrote the massive Amazon series Citadel, to pen the script. Production starts late this summer, and they are literally having to weave the multi-million-dollar shooting schedule around Hemsworth's prior commitments for his bizarre upcoming movie, Cockroach.
The Extraction movies are basically the foundational cornerstone of Netflix's entire original action strategy at this point. They rely on them. I guarantee the minute this press release hit the wire, viewership metrics for the first 2 movies surged right back into their global top 10.
They know exactly what they're doing with the algorithm. Also making massive waves in Hollywood, Aubrey Plaza just completely hijacked the entertainment news cycle. She was spotted walking in Los Angeles, casually debuting a massive baby bump, officially hard launching her pregnancy and her relationship with actor Christopher Abbott all at once.
Wait, back up. They were dating. How did the paparazzi miss that entirely?
Nobody knew it was a complete blackout. They had been rumored to be somewhat close since they worked on the indie movie Black Bear back in 2020, and they did an intense off-Broadway play together in 2023 called Danny and the Deep Blue Sea, but they never confirmed a single thing. Christopher Abbott recently did a cryptic interview where he said they are both unafraid to be ugly and weird and strange, but that was it. The reveal was so completely out of nowhere that their names trended globally on social media for 6 hours straight. Culture writers are universally calling the silent pregnancy debut a classic Aubrey Plaza move because it was so flawlessly weird, understated, and unpredictable.
That is exactly how you handle celebrity news in the modern era. You don't do a magazine cover. You just drop a massive life-altering update on the sidewalk without a single PR press release and let the internet completely lose its collective mind trying to connect the dots.
Unfortunately, the Los Angeles news wasn't all positive or quirky. Former NFL player Ricky Fenars, who played defensive back for the Seattle Seahawks and was a standout at Nebraska, was shot in the stomach in South LA. Local law enforcement sources are reporting the violent incident occurred in the street over an alleged, highly heated love triangle dispute. He was rushed to the hospital, underwent emergency abdominal surgery, and is thankfully expected to survive and recover, but the incident completely shook the incredibly tight-knit Nebraska football alumni network.
That's awful.
Investigators are still pulling security footage and trying to figure out exactly who pulled the trigger and if any other high-profile individuals were present when the argument escalated. From a love triangle shooting in LA to the lush greens of Augusta, we have to talk about the 86-year-old golf legend who just sent spectators running for their lives.
The transition from urban chaos to the hyper-manicured tradition of golf is jarring, and I'm here for it. Round 1 of the Masters tournament is officially underway at Augusta National.
Yep.
And the leaderboard is already completely wild and defying the odds. Patrick Reed surged to a solo lead in the early morning session, hitting 5 under par through the first 9 holes, anchored by an absolutely incredible, mathematically perfect eagle on the 8th hole. Tommy Fleetwood is right on his heels at 4 under. But the most incredible story on the actual competitive scorecard is 60-year-old veteran Jose Maria Olazabal. He shot a 2 under par on the front 9, rolling back the clock to post his best start at Augusta since 2009.
It is always amazing to see the older veterans hold their own against the young guys who drive the ball 400 yards on a course that punishing. But the real story of the morning wasn't on the leaderboard at all, was it?
Not even close. The real story happened at the ceremonial honorary starting tee shot.
Wow.
86-year-old icon Jack Nicklaus stepped up to the tee box to officially open the tournament, standing alongside Gary Player and Tom Watson.
Okay.
The crowd goes dead silent. He takes his swing and he slices the golf ball so brutally hard at such a terrifying velocity directly into the trees that the gallery lining the fairway, which is made up of corporate sponsors and executives, literally had to duck, cover their heads, and scramble into the dirt for their lives.
Just react to the physical mechanics of that imagery for a second. You have an 86-year-old golfing deity launching a dense, dimpled projectile at 100 miles an hour, nearly taking out a row of billionaires and hedge fund managers at the most exclusive, prestigious golf club on Earth.
Exactly.
And what do? They stand up, brush the pine needles off their khakis, check their teeth, and give the man a massive, roaring standing ovation. It is literally the only place in modern sports where you can fire a projectile into a crowd of incredibly rich people and get universally cheered for it. It is peak golf culture.
It was a beautiful, chaotic, highly dangerous moment. And speaking of analyzing ancient history, science has just released a massive, potentially paradigm-shifting update on the Shroud of Turin.
The burial cloth.
Yes, the linen cloth that bears the negative image of a crucified man, which is arguably one of the most intensely debated religious and archaeological artifacts in human history. A brand new, highly advanced DNA analysis of the microscopic dust and fibers on the cloth just definitively identified genetic markers from plant species and human handlers that originated in the Middle East, Central Asia, and Western Europe.
Wait, explain the mechanics of how they trace that, because that completely upends the accepted historical narrative, doesn't it? For decades, skeptics and carbon dating experts have forcefully argued it was just a medieval forgery created by a clever artist in France or Italy in the 1300s, and that the cloth itself never, ever left the European continent.
Exactly. But the science of modern genomic tracing relies on analyzing the pollen and the degraded human DNA trapped in the weave of the linen. Every time someone touched it, or every time it was exposed to the air in a new environment, it absorbed the microscopic biological signature of that location.
Oh, wow.
This new DNA evidence proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the physical cloth traveled extensively across the globe along ancient trade routes, long before its recorded, documented history in Europe began in the 14th century. They even found microscopic traces of DNA from a highly rare, very specific group of Middle Eastern plants that only grow in the immediate geographic vicinity of Jerusalem.
That is wild.
While the genetic scientists are being incredibly careful to state that this does not definitively prove it is a genuine first-century artifact or the burial cloth of Jesus, it completely mathematically destroys the prevailing theory that it was just a local, isolated European forgery. It has reignited the entire theological and historical debate just in time for the Easter season.
The science of historical tracing is just incredible. We are literally using modern computational genomics and pollen mapping to trace the exact physical travel path of a piece of woven fabric from thousands of years ago. It is mind-blowing. And finally, before we wrap, we have to talk about a true hero getting the permanent recognition he deserves.
Who's that?
The country of Cambodia just unveiled a massive 7-foot bronze statue in a highly prominent public space. And the statue is dedicated entirely to Magawa.
I have to ask because I'm out of the loop on this one. Who is Magawa?
Magawa is an African giant pouched rat.
A rat. They built a 7-foot bronze statue for a rat.
The most famous, highly decorated, bomb-sniffing rat in global history. Over his incredibly dangerous 5-year career, Magawa systematically sniffed out and discovered 71 buried landmines and 38 items of highly unstable, unexploded ordnance hidden in the dirt in Cambodia.
That's amazing.
He is officially the first rat in history to ever receive the prestigious PDSA Gold Medal for his animal gallantry and bravery.
Okay, I need to understand the physical mechanics of this.
Yeah.
How does a rat safely disarm a landmine without blowing himself up? Dogs get blown up doing this all the time.
He doesn't disarm them, he locates them. He was trained by an incredible Belgian organization called APOPO. They train these specific rats to use their highly evolved olfactory receptors to smell the chemical signature of TNT degrading in the soil.
Okay, smell it.
The absolute mechanical genius of using an African giant pouched rat instead of a dog is the weight displacement. The rat is incredibly light. He could literally walk directly over the buried pressure plate of an anti-personnel landmine, and his body weight is mathematically insufficient to trigger the firing pin.
That makes sense.
He would scamper through the grass, find the exact location of the buried mine, physically scratch the dirt to alert his human handler, get a piece of a banana as a reward, and move on. He could sweep and completely clear an area the size of a tennis court in 20 minutes. It would take a trained human deminer wearing heavy Kevlar and swinging a metal detector 4 full days to meticulously clear that exact same area.
If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. Who is the real MVP of this episode?
I go on.
The landmine rat or the genetically aggressive warrior weed? Because honestly, I am leaning heavily toward the rat.
It is a tough call, but I agree. The statue was erected to remind the citizens of the ongoing, massive, incredibly dangerous effort to clear the country of war-era explosives left over from decades ago. It is a beautiful, lasting tribute to a tiny animal that legitimately saved countless human lives and limbs.
You know, when you step back, it really leaves you with a profound, almost uncomfortable paradox to think about.
Right.
We just spent this entire hour talking about how human ingenuity is capable of building tandem perovskite solar cells with 34% efficiency. We are mathematically calculating the exact orbital trajectory to launch crews of diverse astronauts into deep space radiation on the Artemis II mission.
Right.
We have the computational power to map the microscopic genetic history of a 10,000-year-old stalk of wheat and a burial cloth. And yet, despite all of that incredible, godlike technological advancement, our geopolitical situation is so broken that we still have to rely on the sheer innocent bravery of a pouched rat sniffing the dirt to clean up the lethal, hidden explosives we leave buried in the mud to kill each other. We can literally touch the stars, but we need a rodent to save us from ourselves.
All right, if we made your drive, your workout, or your downtime even a little bit better today, do us a massive favor. Whether you are watching on YouTube, streaming on Spotify, listening on Apple Podcasts, or literally anywhere else, hit that follow or subscribe button right now. We drop episodes like this every single day, bringing you the world's news in the most interesting way possible. Lock in, because you do not want to miss the crazy stories we have queued up for tomorrow. See you then.